Most people don't fail financially when things are going badly. They fail when things are about to get better. This is the part no one warns you about. The moment right before progress starts compounding is often the moment people panic, sabotage themselves, and undo months or years of effort. Not because they're careless, not because they lack discipline, but because their brain misinterprets improvement as danger. And once you understand this panic point, you'll start seeing it everywhere. In your spending, in your saving, in your investing, in the moments where you suddenly feel the urge to change everything. Let's start with a truth that feels uncomfortable. The brain does not like unfamiliar stability. It prefers familiar struggle. Struggle may be stressful, but it's predictable. Stability is calm, but it's uncertain, and uncertainty is one of the brain's biggest triggers. When you spend years feeling behind financially, your nervous system adapts to that state. Stress becomes normal. Urgency becomes identity. Reacting becomes routine. So when progress starts showing up, even in small ways, it creates a mismatch. Bills feel manageable. Savings start growing. Spending feels less chaotic. There's less pressure, and instead of relief, something unexpected happens. Discomfort. Not logical discomfort, emotional discomfort. Because the brain isn't asking, is this good? It's asking, is this familiar? And unfamiliar often gets labeled as unsafe. This is where the panic point begins. It usually shows up quietly, a subtle restlessness, a feeling that you should be doing more, an urge to optimize, upgrade, or accelerate. You start questioning the boring system that's working. You feel tempted to take a bigger risk. You feel drawn to something that promises faster results. This doesn't feel like sabotage, it feels like ambition. But underneath that ambition is anxiety. The anxiety of sitting in a space you don't emotionally recognize yet. For a long time, money problems gave your brain something to react to, something to fix, something to worry about. That constant stimulation became normal. So when things calm down, the brain looks for the next spike. This is why people often overspend right after paying off debt. Why investors abandon steady strategies for risky bets after early success. Why savers suddenly splurge once their balance grows. The brain wants to restore emotional intensity, not financial logic. Another reason the panic point is so powerful is because progress exposes identity gaps. When you've struggled financially, you build a self-image around that struggle. You're the person who's trying, the person who's getting by, the person who's working on it. When things start improving, that identity no longer fits, and identity loss feels threatening, even if the new identity is better. The brain thinks, who am I without this struggle? What do I do now? What if this doesn't last? So it tests the situation. It creates instability to see if the old identity returns. This testing looks like self-sabotage. But psychologically, it's self-verification. The brain wants confirmation of what it already believes. If it believes progress is fragile, it will behave in ways that prove it. This is why people often say, every time things start going well, something goes wrong. Sometimes that something is their own behavior, but it doesn't feel intentional. It feels emotional. There's also a timing illusion involved. Progress often lags effort. You do the right things for a long time with no visible reward. Then suddenly, results start showing up. That gap trains the brain to expect disappointment. So when improvement finally appears, the brain doesn't trust it. It assumes the drop is coming. This creates preemptive panic. Better to mess things up now than wait for a bigger fall later. At least then the disappointment feels familiar. This is why people quit right before breakthroughs, why they sell right before rebounds, why they abandon habits right before compounding kicks in. The brain chooses familiar pain over unfamiliar peace. Another factor is emotional bandwidth. Struggle consumes attention. When money is tight, your brain is constantly occupied. Budgeting, worrying, planning, reacting. When pressure decreases, mental space opens up, and that space can feel uncomfortable if you're not used to it. Without problems to solve, the brain turns inward. It starts questioning, doubting, overanalyzing. That's when panic sneaks in disguised as insight. You start thinking, is this really enough? Am I missing something? Shouldn't I be doing more? Sometimes doing more is the worst thing you can do, especially when more means abandoning consistency. The panic point is rarely about money itself. It's about emotional regulation. Progress removes urgency, and urgency was regulating your emotions. Without it, the brain feels unanchored, so it creates urgency again. By spending, by risking, by changing plans, by restarting. This keeps people trapped in cycles of almost stable, almost ahead, almost consistent, never long enough for compounding to do its work. This is also why traditional motivation advice fails here. Stay disciplined. Trust the process. Don't self-sabotage. These assume the brain wants progress. Sometimes it wants familiarity more. Breaking through the panic point requires a different approach. Not force, not motivation, not intensity, but recognition. You have to recognize the moment your urge is emotional, not strategic. The moment when nothing is actually wrong, but you feel the need to act. That urge is the signal. It means you're near the edge of a new normal. And the discomfort you feel isn't danger, it's adjustment. People who build lasting wealth don't eliminate panic responses. They learn to pause inside them. They don't immediately obey every financial impulse. They create space between feeling and action. That pause is everything, because panic demands immediacy. Stability requires patience. When you delay action during that moment, something interesting happens. The urge weakens, the emotion passes, clarity returns, and the system continues working. This is why boring consistency beats emotional brilliance. Not because it's smarter, but because it survives emotional turbulence. Another critical shift is redefining progress. Most people expect progress to feel exciting, rewarding, energizing. But real financial progress often feels anticlimactic. Balances move slowly. Habits feel repetitive. Wins feel small. If you expect excitement, you'll feel disappointed. If you expect calm, you'll feel successful. This expectation gap creates panic. People think, if this were working, it would feel better. But working systems often feel quiet. Noise is not progress. Movement is not momentum. Action is not advancement. The panic point is where you learn the difference. It's where you stop confusing emotional stimulation with growth. Another reason people sabotage progress is because early improvement increases perceived risk. When you have little to lose, risk feels abstract. When you start building something, fear intensifies. Now there's something to protect. That fear can push people into two extremes: overprotection or recklessness. They either freeze and stop acting entirely, or they gamble to escape the fear. Both disrupt progress. The middle path feels emotionally uncomfortable, but strategically sound, steady, predictable, unexciting. That's why it's rare. The people who cross the panic point don't do anything dramatic. They keep doing what works while their emotions scream for novelty. They let boredom exist. They let uncertainty linger. They let progress be slow. They stop trying to feel like they're winning and start focusing on not losing momentum. This is also where confidence is built, not from success, but from surviving discomfort without self-sabotage. Each time you resist the urge to blow things up, your brain learns a new pattern. This stability is safe. I don't need to react. I can wait. Over time, the panic point weakens. It still appears, but it doesn't control behavior. That's emotional maturity around money, and it's far more valuable than any tactic or trick. If you're listening to this and recognizing moments where you suddenly changed course, spent impulsively, or abandoned a system that was working, that's not a personal flaw. It's a predictable psychological response, and once you see it, you can prepare for it. You can tell yourself, this urge means I'm close to real progress. Instead of acting, you pause. Instead of reacting, you observe. That one skill can save you years, because wealth isn't destroyed by ignorance. It's destroyed by impatience at the wrong moment. The panic point shows up right before things stabilize, right before compounding begins, right before identity shifts. If you can hold steady there, everything changes. Not overnight, not dramatically, but permanently. In the next video, I'll explain how to build a personal system that absorbs emotional spikes instead of being derailed by them. A system that doesn't rely on motivation, confidence, or discipline. Just predictability. Because predictability is what finally turns progress into permanence.